Hi, good morning all. Just going to give it a couple of more minutes to allow those people to get on who are still joining, and we'll get going in about 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. Okay, let's excuse me. Let's get started. Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for joining the 2008 Windows Server and SQL End of Life and End of Support Services webinar. I'm Matt Hudson. I'm the head of Datacentre and Cloud for Ultima. And essentially what that means is I cover a lot of the what used to be called the enterprise space, so certainly around the compute and storage platforms in both on-premise and cloud, as well as things like disaster recovery, business continuity management within the hybrid IT space. I also cover areas such as cloud application architecture, cloud DevOps, and Azure DevOps, and application re-architecture and those sorts of things. And then finally, my last remit is around data and network services, so covering structured, unstructured data and stuff like that. So got quite a wide breadth, and which is why the Windows Server, which sits in hybrid IT, and the data space sits for the Windows Server and Windows SQL Server end of life services sit well within my team. So today I'm going to talk about a number of areas around the end of life services for Windows 2008, for SQL 2008, and Windows 2008 R2 as well. What the options are for those end of life services, what's available in newer versions, or why it's not only a case of having to upgrade because of compliance reasons or security reasons, but also what realized benefits would we get from doing that upgrade. And then I'll talk a bit about how Ultima might be able to help you guys out with that by doing assessments, and also talk about a few things around migration services within Azure and hybrid use benefits to help get a little bit of assistance in cost benefits from actually moving those workloads into Azure, should that be one of the processes or steps you want to take for fixing the end of support services for Windows and SQL services. Cool. We'll move swiftly on. So I'm assuming everybody knows by now the Windows Server end of the life of both 2008 and 2008 R2 is 2020, January 14th. At this point, all security updates or patches, fixes, hot fixes, everything will cease to function. So it's pretty much identical to where we were with the 2003 end of life for server. However, there are some additional options this time. It's not just a case of you end support and you do something with it. There are a few additional options, which I'll go through on the next slide. This will affect every single Windows 2008 and 2008 R2 Windows server. But what it'll also do is affect any application that's sat on those servers. So if you have any applications such as Exchange 2007 or SQL, even SQL 2012 running on 2008 R2, those applications would cease to be supported also, because the underlying operating system is unsupportable. Thus, the application that sits on that underlying infrastructure will also be unsupportable. So we have to take into account not only the servers that are going end of life, but also which applications are hosted on those servers and what impact that might have on the business, such as Exchange 2007 is running on there. Is having Exchange 2007 in an unsupported platform going to cause you a significant issue? I suspect the answer is probably yes. This will affect virtual and physical servers that are sat on-premise within your current data centers or sat hosted in any environment, with the exception of, that takes me on to my next slide, the exception of Microsoft Azure. So essentially, we have, I say there's 3 options, there's actually 4 options. The first option is do nothing. We can simply do nothing to those Windows 2008 and 2008 R2 servers and essentially accept the risk that if those servers become compromised or those servers fail, or the applications on those servers fail, that Microsoft will be unable to support you during that process. We'll only patch you, and there will be some certain compliance reasons as to why that may not be suitable or possible within your business. So things like GDPR is a really good example of this. If there's a data breach due to the fact that you're running an old operating system which is unpatched, which resulted in data loss, then there'll be some legal issues around things like insurance, or whether that's covered due to the fact that there was knowing non-compliance with those things. So there is a 4th option, I do nothing, which has to be risk assessed as to whether the data on there is critical, whether the service is critical, the application is critical, and if it's not, and those risks can be signed off, then that's a perfectly legitimate thing to do. However, most people won't be able to do those due to those reasons I mentioned. So we have 3 options: simply upgrade. So we can upgrade the operating system. 2008 32-bit is more problematic due to the re-architecture of the applications going to 64-bit. But 2008 R2, most applications will generally be supported on an upgrade to 2012 R2, and 2016, and ultimately 2019. These applications can be either re-architected or redeployed onto a new server, or they can be in-place upgrades. The in-place upgrades from 2008 R2, particularly when you're talking about a virtual environment, are not too difficult and are pretty easy to test within a virtualized segmented environment. So we can do those. It is, however, the most time-consuming option, particularly if you're going to rehost these applications or replace them or retire them. But you get most return on investment on them because you've got a more support for operating system, additional features, additional services to be able to deliver, more compliance, and more life in that service. And then there are two other options. They're essentially the same option, but via different mechanisms. Microsoft, unlike 2003 server, where if you wanted to get support past end of extended support, there was incredibly expensive support services you could buy from Microsoft, which I think were in the 7 figures sort of area, and really only enterprise, large enterprise would even consider it. It's changed now with 2008 and 2008 R2, and similar with SQL as well. I'll go into in a minute, where you can actually buy support annually from Microsoft or through your LSP or CSP provider. So Ultima can do this as well, and you can buy extended support, which will give you those security updates over the next 3 years. The cost of this is 75% annual for every single server license you own. So if you own a load of core licenses, you'll have to pay the total cost of the core license at 75% for every year that you want to extend that support for on a per year basis. However, support for that will end in 3 years from January 2023. So it's purely delaying the issue. But certainly for some workloads, that might be a requirement where we just simply can't upgrade, and the risk of leaving it unsupported is too high. The second option, which is actually the same option, but with a slight different method, if you move your workload to Microsoft Azure, and it's a 2008 or 2008 R2 workload, Microsoft Azure will provide you that extended support for free if you have software assurance on that Windows license, which means that if you pick up a 2008 R2 server, move it into Microsoft Azure, they will give you those 3-year support absolutely free, so you don't have to pay that 75% annually. You'll get the same level of cover as if you bought that support, and whilst it's running in Microsoft Azure, you'll get that support up until again January 2023. So software assurance is not required side, but you still need to procure the license for running it in Azure. There are hybrid license rights applicable. So if you do have SA, you can move that workload to Azure and you will be able to use that hybrid license to run that workload in Azure, which means you don't have to buy a Windows license to run it in Azure. You can run it via a Windows, a Linux platform, and I'll explain what that looks like later on in a later slide. I'll go into a bit more detail later on, but just give a summary of what's going on with SQL Server as well. Very similar setup. SQL is 10 years old, and the support is actually slightly earlier, July 2019. Once 2019 goes end of life, so it's actually only 7 months now. This will impact again any workload that's running on-premise, and any application that uses that SQL database again will be compromised when it comes to support services and compliance. So this is slightly more urgent, and the same features go for this as it did with the Windows servers, with the Windows end-of-life services. So we have, excuse me a second. Slides are slightly out of order. Okay, we have the upgrade option, same as before. We can re-platform to 2017 or 2019, and that re-platforming can be either on-premise or into the cloud. There's again, this is the hardest option because there is no. It involves having to do testing, involves having to understand whether your application supportability for the SQL backend is supported, but also there are. When we look at the actual SQL database itself, there may be compatibility issues of running it in a later version or running it in the cloud service. There are some options to help to look at that and understand whether that is a problem, and the Azure Database Migration Service can help provide that service. But also Ultima have a number of packages as well. I'll go into a bit of detail in a minute as to understanding, to give you a visibility of your SQL estate, what is upgradable, what isn't upgradable, what challenges might be, what you might face, and what the potential target platforms might be. So we have that upgrade option, very similar to the Windows upgrade, a chance to re-platform and get all those new features that are in later versions of SQL and potentially into cloud. We also have that fourth option, again, do nothing, which we spoke about previously. And then we have those exactly the same two options that we get with Windows Server end of life. So this will give you another 3 years beyond the extended support life, which is July 2019. So that will take you to July 2022, and this will then provide you the same level of support, the security patches that will be required to keep the server in a compliant state. Again, if you move that SQL instance to Azure, you'll get that same coverage but for free. And again, the cost of covering that 75% of the annual SQL Server license cost, which is going to be fairly significant. That option is really only viable for a short period of time, just to give you that coverage whilst you're working out how to move that workload or retire that workload or get that workload sorted out. Cool. So spoke briefly about the fact that there are some there's new operating systems. So Windows Server 2016, actually 2019 now. These have additional functionality sets, so it's well worth having a look. I won't read through these, but it's well worth having a look to see whether there are additional feature sets you might want. This is security features. There's quite a lot in 2019, 2016, a few more in 2019 as well, to help provide a better security platform for your for your Windows Server platform. Same with Hypervisor features. If you're running Hyper-V at the moment within your 2008 R2 estate, I would highly recommend you upgrade to 2012, just because of stability in general. But 2016 offers a load of new features. Storage migration, storage replication is much improved, and storage space as direct is now, certainly with 2019, is a pretty stable platform. And site-aware failover clusters and stuff. So there's a fair number of chunks there. Again, we'll be sending these slides out afterwards, so I'm not going to read through all of the additional functionality, but certainly just in the hypervisor space, there is a boatload of new features which will be really useful. SQL-wise and the re-platform, we talked about the fact on the previous slide that there are People have physical servers. Virtualization provides you with lower administration and lower cost. IaaS in Azure gives you that low administration overhead again, and then PaaS and SaaS services, which is the state where people want to get to. So the target platform can be one of any of those for the migration of that existing 2008 SQL Server to a new version of 2016. It can stay on physical. We can go to virtual, go to IaaS, go to PaaS and SaaS. So there are certainly plenty of target platforms to have a look at. And even in that PaaS instance, PaaS flavor, there are a number of different flavors in there, whether it's a managed instance, whether it's a managed database, or whether it's a Windows Server, a scale set running within a database cluster. Okay, and similar to the Windows 2008 to 2016 or 2019 new feature sets, SQL, apologies for the size of the text, is pretty small, but SQL has a fair number of improvements. One which I'd like to highlight, which isn't actually clearly defined here, but 2008 SQL Server was created when GDPR didn't exist, when GDPR wasn't a thought. So there are no tool sets or functionalities built into SQL 2008 that are built specifically to help with challenges around GDPR, for example. 2017 and 2019 have functionality and feature sets specifically to address concerns within GDPR. Things like right to be forgotten and searchable database deletions, those sorts of things are not available in 2008, but all the tool sets around being able to apply that functionality. However, 2017 and 2019 have specific tool sets to enable compliance within GDPR. It doesn't make you GDPR compliant, but it enables the ability to allow you to become GDPR compliant and apply those things to your databases. So ignoring the fact that you have to upgrade 2008 at some point for SQL, there are some compliance reasons why you'd want to, and there's also loads of feature reasons why you'd want to as well. Again, these slides will go out, and there's plenty of Microsoft articles which will talk about what functionality you would like you get from newer versions, and how that might actually improve your business, make you more agile, provide better business intelligence. And a big one here, if you look at the bottom right hand corner, container support and Linux support. So SQL 2019 it runs extremely well on Linux. This is a massive licensing gain for a number of people, particularly those who are running SQL potentially in a Linux state, or certainly want to run SQL in the cloud as a full-fat SQL server. Not having to run a Microsoft operating system may provide great supportability for you if you're a particular Linux house, but also licensing reduction costs. So it's well worth looking at whether the Linux version of SQL would actually be able to suit your needs, and understand whether that platform might be a platform of choice going forward when you start running it in cloud services or even on premise. And again, container support, important for a lot of the DevOps functions, whether running databases. I know running databases in containers is maybe not something which people are doing right now, but certainly in the future, developers are looking at doing that an awful lot more, particularly with persistent containers. So we're looking at that level of support is clearly not available in any older version of SQL. Cool. I'll go relatively briefly through these. So Ultima have a couple of end-of-life services which we're able to offer, specifically aimed around providing visibility of what you currently have, what the challenges might be for a target platform, and what the upgrade options or portability options or certainly the support requirements will be for those servers. So with SQL, with Windows 2008 and 2008 R2, we can do a small or medium or large engagement. Essentially, you're going to have a look at your state, understand all your services, the dependencies that happen between them, understanding what application sets are running on there, and then creating an advisor around what you can do with these servers, which ones are suitable for upgrade, which ones are suitable for moving into the cloud, which ones are suitable for replatforming or have to be replatformed, and thus be able to give you a target operating model to understand that what your 2008 estate might look like if you move into a new operating system arena, and also what that cost might look like, how much effort it might be to do that, and if those services are moving to the cloud services, what sort of effort and timescales and migration opportunities there are to move some of those into PaaS services up in Microsoft Azure. We'll have some data sheets which we can send out as well to give a bit more detail around what's included in these end-of-life services assessments, and what deliverables are available, and how we approach that. We do a very similar one for SQL Server as well, so SQL 2008 and 2008 R2. Again, we have a look at the existing estate, understand what could be transitioned, what the compatibility issues, and we can also take this one step further as well. We can even, within a SQL area, we have a consolidation report which we can bolt onto the back of this to actually say, you've got 23 instances of SQL running right now with 14 different versions, with 118 databases. We can consolidate this down to 4 instances of these 4 different versions, and this will reduce licensing costs by X because of the few instances, and these databases would be able to move into this instance, these into this, this into this, this and this, to be able to provide you a solid target operating model with reduced cost of running that for administration, as well as licensing costs for Windows and SQL, and also give you the effort of what it would look like to actually do that consolidation and upgrade and migration across into this new target platform. So we can add this consolidation report onto the back of the end of life assessment as well, and that gives a real clear report saying this is what we need to do, this is the cost, and this is the effort required, and these are the risks associated to moving these services as well. Most services now are most SQL services, as long as they haven't been upgraded all the way from SQL 5, whatever, a lot of them are pretty portable now. They will go to later versions, but we can actually tell you this database will run on this version, and this version is the latest version it will run on. So we can do that consolidation and set that assessment. I'll mention this very briefly because it's a new product. It's in preview, or just leaving preview actually, I believe, any minute now. But this is a really useful tool which is part of the Microsoft migration stack which we've got. So we've got Microsoft Map and ASR, but also we've got Azure Migrate, and we've got Azure DMS migration tool, which is the database migration service tool. This allows us to do, for those services we want to move into Azure, we can do that one step further, and we can actually understand what the uncompatibility features are, what the effort is required, and what detail around that will do to be able to make it compatible with a SQL instance or SQL database or SQL scale set. Then we can have a look at those issues and look at the impact as to what that might look like, and what fixes we need to apply to the database or to the instance to be able to make it cloud compatible and PaaS compatible. So the first run at this will be what can move to cloud, and this second bit will be the stuff that can or might be able to move to the cloud, what changes need to happen, and how we're going to have a look at that to understand what that might look like going forward, and what efforts could be required to resolve these issues. Some might be nothing at all, just to set it up. And then and quite important as well is for those workloads that we are looking at moving to Microsoft Azure, because we want to get that extra support life, or simply when we do want to migrate onto 2016 server or 2019 server, we actually don't want to do it on premise. If we're going to re-platform it, why not re-platform it straight into the cloud? For those who have Microsoft Azure hybrid benefits through enterprise agreements, can take, for both Windows and SQL, can take advantage of the hybrid use benefits. Depending on what editions you're running of Windows and what editions you're running of SQL, not only can you use your on-premise license and move it to the cloud, depending on what license you have, you can actually use that license in the cloud at the same time as using it on-premise. So if you've got a Windows, let's say you've got Windows Datacentre Edition, and you're using it on-premise to run your hypervisor environment, let's say, or to sat on top of your VMware environment to license your hypervisor environment, those data center licenses can remain on-premise and cover your on-premise license, but they can also be used at the same time on any server at all within Microsoft Azure, which means you get a massive reduction in the cost of running that Azure workload up there. A typical example here, I've got the top picture in the top right-hand corner. If you've got a D2V2 workload, it's about $4,500 a year to run that as a Windows workload. If you run it as a Linux workload, it costs $2,000 a year, and then you have to obviously maintain your subscription on that Windows license. So for that $180 of your subscription gets renewed each year. So your actual total cost of running that in Azure is actually $2,200. So half of what it would be if you had to buy the Windows license to run it in Microsoft Azure. So there's significant benefits in running it there. And if you're going to be running your service a long time, let's say you've committed to 3 years of that Windows 2008 server that you've migrated up to Azure, you know it's going to run for 3 years because that's the end of life of your application, and you know it's going to be sat there and as a static Windows VM, so you're not going to change it in any significant way. We can also use reserved instances to reduce that cost even further. So you can commit to 3 years in advance for that commit, and that reduces that cost of running it in Azure even more. So actually, the cost of moving a 2008 server or 2008 R2 server into Azure, the cost of running it in Azure as an IaaS instance can actually be offset significantly by these hybrid rights as well as this reserved instance cost. Again, if you talk to our licensing team within Ultima, we can have a look at what platform you have, how we can then port that license into Azure, and what the costs would be of running those instances in Microsoft Azure. Cool. So I've got I pretty much brings to the end of what we're going to talk about within the Microsoft Windows Server and SQL Server end-of-life services. There are a couple of offerings we mentioned there around assessments, which again, if you approach your account manager, account director, or the Microsoft team within Ultima, we can give you a bit more information on that, give you some sizing information on what that might look like within your estate, give you visibility of that estate, and provide you with those services. We're also able to look at that licensing element as well as Azure subscriptions and CSP as well. Yeah, one of my team will send out the information regarding the slide decks, and then we'll do this. We'll also send out the webinar as well as a link. Lastly, I have a question. So the question was, what are your comments on doing an in-place upgrade from 2008 to 2012 and to 2016, or are you recommending fresh installs and migrate application services? Yeah, it's a really good question. So for those people that do want to actually do that porting of the application, the recommended approach would be to, if possible, if the media exists, if the application owner has visibility of how the application works, and if there's the assistance from the vendor or assistance from certainly people product experts in that area, then deploying that new application on a new version of Windows and then porting the data is going to give you the best. That's not the most success rate, but give you the best service going forward. You've got a brand new, fresh version of Windows. There's going to be less issues when it comes to that server running long term over the next 3, 5, 7 years. However, when we're looking at these upgrade opportunities, we generally look at how to move an application or upgrade a server. We'll look at a number of options, whether to upgrade it, rehome it, retire it, move it to a cloud service, migrate it to a PaaS service, or maybe do something else, replace it with a brand new application or new version of application. When we do an assessment, we'll generally look at all those options for each service, apply a risk categorization to it. So how risky is it to move it? What effort it's required to move it? What time and money it costs to move it as well? So is there a cost of upgrading the application license itself? Is there huge amounts of effort to move that, and is that risk and effort worth it over a quick and easy to test like inline upgrade from 2008 to 2012? And when we're talking about inline upgrade, that can be tested relatively easily in a virtual environment, like I said earlier, by just cloning that server, upgrading it, or cloning a set of servers, upgrading it, testing it, seeing if it works, and that gives you a pretty quick and easy indication as to whether it's upgradable. But certainly, I would recommend, yes, I would move, if possible, best case scenario, brand new version of the application on a brand new server, and then migration of the data across. But for many reasons, that may not be possible. Cool. We've got any other questions? I think that's I think that's all the question. Oh, do Ultima provide service to upgrade 2008 domain? What do you recommend for the domain upgrade running 2008 with about 15 DCs? Yeah, so yeah, we can do Active Directory applications as well. If it's 2008 domain, I recommend upgrading 2008 R2 functionality level, purely because there's loads of new features. There's loads of features in 2008 domain. R2, which are things like undelete and rollback and granular password policy and stuff. Going even further, yes, we can certainly help with deploying new domain controllers, 2016, 2012, 2016 domain controllers. And in the instance of infrastructure applications such as Active Directory or Exchange or SQL, we highly recommend at that point to actually deploy brand new servers and migrate the services across. So putting new domain controllers in, return the old domain controllers, fix the issues with DNS and static entries and WINS compatibility and all sorts of things, and then return 2008 services and then upgrading domain is certainly pretty straightforward to do. I say straightforward. In theory, straightforward to do, but there's often compatibility issues with old version of Linux maybe, or there are challenges around legacy systems having hard-coded pointers in there that points towards these domain controllers. But certainly part of our first step would be to get an understanding of what your domain estate looks like, scan it, understand what the dependencies are, work out what would break initially by removing those servers, and then resolving and remediate those issues, and then upgrade a domain by putting new domain controllers in, migrating the FSMA roles, retiring the old domain controllers, and then upgrading the domain functional levels and forest functional levels. We can do that in multi-domain environments and forest environments as well. Cool. That's the two questions. If there's no other questions, I will finish this now. Thank you very much for attending. Appreciate you sitting through that 42 minutes of end-of-life services. If any questions, please approach your account manager and account directors, and please approach the Microsoft team at Ultima as well. Thank you very much, and yeah, have a good rest of your day.